Cool. So first up, who are we? We are from ROI Solutions. A lot of people think it's ROI Solutions. It is not. It looks like that. It looks like return on investment, but it's ROI. But it's spelled like ROI, but it's pronounced like ROI. Just to get it nice and confusing there. We were founded in '99, just like Engaging Networks, and we are a strategic partner. We're a technology partner of Engaging Networks. So you've probably heard over the course of the last day and a half, a lot of like Engaging Networks saying we aren't the database of record. We are the database of record for many nonprofit organizations. So we are one product and one focus. Again, kind of like you heard Graham saying yesterday, they have their focus of the awesome stuff that they do online. We have one focus of the awesome, massive database of record that we have. What we'll talk about today specifically is how to do integrations, a lot of it based on the learnings that we've done because of our partnership with Engaging Networks and the integrations we've built with them. We of course have ones that we built with other systems. It's just we really like Engaging Networks. It is a scalable, customizable database, and kind of again similar like Engaging Networks. We do monthly releases, so we're always looking ahead, always looking to improve, and always putting out new features. As I said, we have a strategic partnership with Engaging Networks, and what's great about it is we do actually 2 monthly dedicated calls, one talking about the technology piece, that's this guy, and then one more so talking about all of our mutual clients and future clients that we're looking at, and just trying to see what's cooking, what are we hearing on either side of the table, and how can we make the product better, how can we make the integration better, how can we solve for this thing that we're hearing. So it really allows us to just make this integration the best thing we possibly can. I'll let Lucas introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Lucas Cunningham. I've been at ROI for about 11 years now. I've been responsible for building most of the integrations that our clients have done, both with either Engaging Networks or any of the other various online vendors that you've probably heard of as well. For very small ones, very specific ones like PBS and Vault, we do integrations with those with our public broadcasting companies, through Engaging Networks, and some more targeted ones like mobile comments or text messaging, where it's a very small amount of data that we're going to pass back and forth. It's centered on phone messaging.
And I'm Sarah Burney, I'm product manager, former business analyst, and really what I do is I ask the organizations a lot of questions. So I'll talk mostly about some discovery and kind of what our process looks like, where Lucas will handle more of the really, really smart stuff, because he's really smart. So cool. Yeah, and then just, to tag along with what Lucas was saying as well, is just to show, we've done this a few times, so we're really hoping to just kind of highlight some of the best practices that we've learned along the way, and make you feel a little bit less scared about doing integrations.
Actually, before we get too much further, so ROI Engaging Networks have right now 10 clients. All of them have, or 10 mutual clients. All of them have a full integration, syncing back and forth between ROI and Engaging Networks. Are any of those clients here? No. So there's.
See a couple of them.
So, of course, if you have questions about anything as we go along, please don't be shy with us.
Yeah. Cool. So, like I said, I like to ask a lot of questions, starting with just here's what we hope to cover. We'll actually answer the questions. So we'll go over just what exactly is a sync. That's the demything, debunking part 1. And then just go through how do you start, what is it that you should even sync between your systems, how to build it, who should build it, and then what happens after you launch this huge project that you've been working on, then what do you do? So we'll just kind of go through that. Let's do smart stuff.
This is me. Okay. All right. So integrations or syncs. Well, so why would you want to sync data? I guess that's where it begins. They're both systems, especially engaging networks and all that, they can do a lot for you. They offer you a lot of ability to edit and transform your constituent data, manipulate it, pass information around. Syncs can help to take that manual process of editing constituents out of the hands of regular workers, so that it frees up more time for your staff to focus on other things. I'm trying to read through some of my notes here. Sorry.
Yeah, as you read through that, and for those of you who were here in the 9 a.m. session, Drew from HRC, it's kind of like what he was talking about with marketing automation, where he's able to set up these journeys, these email campaigns, and then so he can focus on other stuff. So he's allowed to go and work on other things, like more strategy and such. So kind of a similar idea of why you might want to do an integration to begin with is to not do those manual file transfers, those uploads, to try and take some of that out of your hands, and not having to do that every day or week or whatever that is.
Right, especially if you're bringing in data from many different sources. Where Roy is the database of record for our clients, we've got inputs from all of their vendors, and when you think about what you're doing online, there are certain pieces of information that are coming from offline that you probably want in your online world as well to help inform what you're doing online, be it your targeting campaigns or ask amounts. If someone is signed up as a sustainer offline, you want to know about that online before you opt for asking them to become a sustainer for you again. So the syncs will do a lot of this work for you, helping to keep this information as full and complete in your online world, but also bringing it back into a database of record like Roy. It helps to complete that picture of the constituents' work, of the constituents' actions. With engaging networks, we're able to bring over all of the email contact results is what we refer to. The opens, the clicks, bounces, the unsubscribes, all this sort of information can come back into Roy. And then it can also be passed around to any other vendors that need to know about this sort of information as well.
Not scary so far, right? These things aren't scary. Okay. Yeah.
All right, so yeah, there are a lot of acronyms that can throw around, and there are more that I didn't include on here. There's OSDI, which is fantastic. The overall point here is that it can get kind of overwhelming just to look at and think about all these acronyms. Acronyms either build walls to exclude the uninitiated or prop up one's own self of self-importance. The only true measure of an API is what it allows you to do. What pieces of data does it expose for you to either retrieve or update? After that, it's just the internet. It's what we use every day for any number of things. We're pushing and pulling data just over the internet. The methods in which we do that are more focused on what the syncing partner allowed us to do. But at the end of the day, we're all subject to the same network configuration issues that any of us have experienced, either just in our own offices, in a data center, whether it's our data center at Roy, whether it's the Dallas data center or the Toronto data center for engaging networks. There's any number of other elements that come into play with this things. But it comes down to having a partner that you trust as well. one reason why Roy has partnered with Engaging Networks is that we have a very common shared set of values in that the money that we make, we also reinvest directly into our product, the same way that Engaging Networks does. They reinvest it into their infrastructure to enhance the data centers, to be able to handle the increased volume of emails and everything else that they're sending out on your behalf. Roy does the same thing. It's a constant reevaluation of what we have and what we're doing now, and looking not just 6 months into the future, but 18 months to see where we're going to be, where our clients are going to be, and what we can do to help support what they're doing, help support the increased volume of data that travels back and forth between Roy and Engaging Networks in particular. On any given day, Roy will process upwards of 500,000 requests from Engaging Networks on behalf of all of our clients. One or two of our clients are responsible for
499,000 of those.
Yes. PETA, are you here?
I see you.
You guys are fantastic. You generated an incredible amount of volume, and you forced both Engaging Networks and us to rethink how we do some of our things. And that's one of, we like that challenge. And that's part of why we build these things as well. This increased amount of volume traveling back and forth between the two systems completes the picture to a more dynamic way for either your staff that are working in the CRM or the staff that are working online.
We had an opportunity to throw some buzzwords there. 360 constituent view.
No.
Big data. No.
I'm not a fan of acronyms, and I'm not a fan of those words.
Yeah, and that slide that was just up with the acronyms, that was kind of just like a very calming moment for me when Lucas explained it to me. He said, it's just the internet. Like, don't worry about all that stuff, because I know when we talk to clients, they'll say like, well, do you have an API, and do you have this? And it's like, well, yes, but that's not really the question. That's not even really what's pertinent. It's more just, what do you want? We will do it. So, I don't know. When you dumbed it down for me, I felt very good. Yeah.
So what does Syncs mean to Roy and what they should be to you? So Roy, being the database of record for all of our partners, we take on the task of building out these synchronizations between other vendors, which means that we explore what the other vendors offer and their API, what they allow us to do. We work directly with the client then to figure out what they want to do, what they need to do. And we take ownership of building the entire sync. Once it's built, it's not just a matter of we walk away. It's not just a thing that kind of always runs on its own. That's the intent of what they are, and they do that. But we're always, like I mentioned with PETA, we're always seeing where they're not performing as well as they should. And so we're taking the responsibility for keeping those up to date, for improving the processes, for identifying issues when they happen, taking responsibility for issues when they happen as well. That's one thing Roy takes very seriously, is that we believe in what our clients are doing, and that's part of why we are able to partner with them. So we believe in what you're doing either online or offline, and we're there to support everything that you do in any way that we can. That goes into this ongoing maintenance bullet point. Whenever you and your staff have questions, Roy's there to answer them.
We just had one come up. We just had one come up yesterday while we were at the conference. So.
Yeah, so that happens all the time, and we're here to answer them. It's not there's not a call center where your calls get forwarded to. You're not shuffled around between many different people who may have never spoken with you or your organization before. You're going to talk to select few people at Roy. They're going to be familiar with who you are and what you're doing. And at the very back end of things, people like me are there who are very intimately familiar with what these processes are, what they're doing, what they're supposed to do, and how they're supposed to be run. It also means that we become more and more familiar with the online vendors that are partners like engaging members. So we become more and more familiar with what your online world looks like and how that's built out.
Yeah, and being that sort of expert, really trying to understand what you're doing, that's absolutely something you want as you look to build out some sort of integration, is to make sure you have everyone really getting it and familiar. At least you have that kind of core group of people. That actually is a good segue into our next slide, of just where do we even start with that, and then part of that is gathering that group of people. So someone also yesterday used continuum, so I'll use that today. So this is also a similar sort of continuum of where to start. There are key sorts of questions you want to answer, but they all really inform each other. So Lucas touched on, well, why even have an integration in the first place? That might be that Sally is manually uploading files every day, and it takes 3 hours every day, and if Sally could get those 15 hours back per week and the 10 hours on the weekends because Saturdays are crazy, whatever, that's like a full-time position almost that you could recoup by building some sort of integration. But integrations aren't always the way to go. Sometimes an upload is perfectly fine to do that, do those file transfers back and forth. Particularly if you can get it in a more scheduled or automated way, that's great. But that's something to really think through. Sometimes you're tasked with building an integration because a board member says so. They say, I have this thing and you have to do it, so there. I've seen it, I've seen that happen, so sometimes that's the why. But that also then informs, well, who needs to be involved? So that board member probably isn't going to be involved with building it or with probably doing much other than saying, okay, great, it's done. But that's probably a key player that you'll need to have, keep them informed about progress. They might set your deadlines, they might set whatever. Also, for the who needs to be involved, you need to figure out who are those partners. Lucas mentioned that for the integrations that we've built, we've authored those, we've built those, while working with our clients. You might work with another system and another, database where that isn't the case. Someone else might offer it. Maybe you have some wicked smarty farty on staff who's like, nope, I can totally do this myself. Cool, that's great. But obviously you need someone who can do that, or a team of people to do that. You also want to make sure you have people on both ends. So, in our example, it would be you want that team at Engaging Networks, and you want that team of Roy who can talk to each other, who can talk to you, get all of you in a room together to really work through those processes and those systems.
And I think yesterday in one of the sessions by the Grass Ryan's group, Ryan with 2 N's made a good point of establishing your stakeholders. That is so important on the side of our clients, because with Roy Engaging Networks, we don't have a ton of staff turnover. Like I said, I've been there for 11 years. A lot of my colleagues have been there longer. Engaging Networks is very similar. But establishing your stakeholders within your organizations for this online world, and what it means to sync this data, is tremendously important. It's important for us to be able to know that we're talking to somebody who has, we know they have a vested interest in what we're trying to build for them, what Engaging Networks is trying to build for them as well.
No, absolutely. And also just, within your own organization, at least what I've seen as we've worked through, standing up these brand new integrations for organizations, that tends to also be where we can help, you hear a lot about breaking down the silos, buzzword. that's where we try to help and say like, okay, we get that you're the digital person and you launch the emails, like that's cool. What about your direct mail person? Is there something that you're doing with those direct mail donors to, you know, a pre-renewal email or something like that, or a telemarketing follow-up? So we try to help, and you'll see in the next slide, get through that through discovery of trying to figure out like, okay, I get that you have this email thing, but like you use your internet and your webpage for so much more. Let's think more holistically about that. So that also the who and the what, those start to come together to say, well, what is that data that we need in either system? You know, over the last 8.5, we've seen there's a ton of data that's in engaging networks, and it's so awesome, and there's Google Analytics, and there are tags and attributes and all this stuff. You don't need all of that necessarily in your database of record. Some of it you absolutely might want it. Some of it you'll need to have, but you know, to also just think through that process of like, okay, will I really use this thing over here? If not, there's really not a good reason to then just clutter up that system with data you'll never really need in there. And then finally with the how, that's usually where someone like Lucas comes into play to actually how to do it. But part of that conversation is, is it just one direction? Do you really only need to push data from system A to system B? And that's really all you care about. You never really need to bring it back in. We do have a couple integrations like that, not with engaging networks, but with other systems. And that's, it's really a choose your own adventure with the organizations we work with. So part of where I come into play when working through integrations is through this discovery, this documentation, so the entire exploration and discovery process. This is where my love for asking questions really comes into play. So it's a lot of, okay, we have this thing. Okay, well, what else do you have? We also have direct mail. Okay, what do you care about direct mail? We care about appeals. Okay, where do you store the data in appeals? And is it really all appeals or just the April appeal? It's just the April appeal. Okay, so, a teacher once taught me many years ago that you have to ask why 5 times to get to the real truth of something. Poor Lucas gets a lot of those questions. Usually it's more how, but he speaks the truth very, very quickly to get me off his back. But you want that. You want to really make sure you have someone who's helping work through that, or you're asking that of yourselves of, okay, on the surface I want member type. Okay, do you also need to know when they're due to expire or when they last gave you a gift? Is there some other component of that you actually, that's really the crux of the matter, not just that they're, member type A or that they're a major donor, things like that. And then the other piece of that discovery is making sure you document the heck out of it. So the discovery process you go through, it should be in plain language, it should be in English, it's not JSON, XML, all that, all those acronyms. That's not it. It should be a real conversation of what is the thing you're trying to do, and then let someone think through what does that mean for the data. So it might be, I need to, thank my donors. Well, how do you know who a donor is? What do you really need to thank them? Do you need the amount? Do you need that? So that informs what is the data that needs to go back and forth, what regularity with which to do that. And then all that talking, all of that discovery, that should go into some sort of specification document. That should inform some sort of field map to say, field X in system A maps to field Y in system B. And it's that sort of information that would go to someone like Lucas who can say, okay, your fields and engaging networks, your supporter data setup, you call it F name instead of first name. Well, in our database, it's called name_first. Fine, great, we know what to do with it. We just need to know where that data lives. And all of that should be a process, and you really want to make sure that you have your stakeholders, or at least 1 or 2 on your team, who understand that and can understand, what is generally happening in that specification document, generally what is happening with the integration, so that when those questions do arise, you want to be able to be your first line of defense. You want to be able to, try and figure out like, oh, this person's name changed. Why? Oh, it says here on page 3. always update first name when it comes through, or always put it into proper case, or whatever that is. So things like that, you really just want to make sure you can work through that. But then also making sure that as changes arise, that you're updating that documentation, that if now it's called, first name, I don't know why you would call it that, but let's just say you did, okay, make sure you update that documentation so that 3 years from now, 5 years from now, you retire and you move to Malibu, someone else can pick that up and they say, okay, it's first name, why it's a typo, I don't know, but first name equals first name, and that's what you're saying. What other note do? Oh, and then the other part of this is where auxiliary comes in. So the other part that we like to think through as we're going through discovery is thinking, well, is there something else that might need to happen to basically support the integration? So, some conversation we were having yesterday, we were talking about, there might be a flag, there might be some sort of indicator in your database that you want to push over into engaging networks. Okay, how is that indicator set? Maybe there's some sort of sweep that happens on the back end that says when, their first name starts with a J and their eye color is blue and they like oranges on a Tuesday, like whatever those data points are, it can be as weird as you want. Okay, they get the whatever flag, and that's really important for us to push over into our online system. And those data points that you want to push, this is again where someone like me would ask a bunch of questions to really say like, well, why and what is it you really need, is to really help you think through what's your segmentation, what's your suppression, what sort of conditional content do you need to drop in. So things like most recent contribution date, it has to get passed into engaging networks in a specific way for you to query it, but it looks ugly if you try to drop that in as conditional content. So again, that's some of that stuff you really want to think through is how am I using this data? And again, if it's something that you have stored like eye color is in your database of record, but you're never ever going to query on it, suppress on that, select on that, drop it in its conditional content, you don't need to send eye color over and just eat up one of your supporter fields. Even though you have a bunch of them that you can work with, it can become annoying to scroll if you have a bunch of stuff you don't need. That one. So that leads really into that, what is it that you want to sync? So what we have built, again, because of this partnership we have with Engaging Networks, we do have what we call our out-of-the-box integration. Don't be fooled, it does a whole bunch of stuff because we've been able to just tack onto it as, we'll use PETA again as an example. They wanted to do something for pledge recapture or pledge upgrade, something with pledges, and we went, well, duh, that's a really good idea. All right, let's have this kind of code set at the ready, so if someone else asks about this, we can say, hey, here's something we built before, does that work for you? And so what we do in terms of what to sync, we have a base, I think it's a 29-page specification document of all these things that we've learned that seem like these are pretty standard and pretty good ideas. Stuff about your membership information, your, some sort of giving summary. So most recent, highest, original gift, date, source, channel, like all that sorts of information. Obviously, contact info. So we have a whole kind of suite of things, and what we've done is distilled it down into about a 5-page document that's human readable, that can say like, here's what it does. This is starting that path of, getting people to understand just kind of generally what it is that's happening without being bombarded with a 30-page document right from the get-go. And so part of this, is just thinking of, again, what is it that you want in either system. So in your ECRM, like in Engaging Networks, like I said, select, suppress conditional content. Maybe there's some additional reporting where you need a metric from your offline system that you would need to push into Engaging Networks. I don't think I've really seen it yet because the stuff that you get already within Engaging Networks is like super awesome, and then you have your like Google Analytics reporting. But it might be something that you really want to push through because you want to pivot on a metric, on a thing within Engaging Networks. Great, if that's what you want, fine. Go ahead and push that through. And then in terms of what you want to bring back into your database, obviously the money, you want to be able to do that sort of financial reconciliation. any sort of analysis you want to do. My former employer was very, very big on analysis, so there's a lot of data that they're bringing back in from engaging networks because they love data, they love analysis, and there are so many metrics that they report on through Roy, and that also informs things like their direct mail, their telemarketing, any sort of offline channels. There's a lot of engaging networks data that they use to do that, to inform that. Prospecting campaigns, all those juicy nuggets of information about petitions and emails and Target and all that stuff, you bring that into Roy, then you can use that in the offline world. And there's my 360 view buzzword. And then the other part of the discovery of what to sync. So again, this is one of Lucas's awesome things that kind of distilled it for me, is you have to think about speed, you have to think about quality, and then the cost. What's the money associated with that? And he said, pick two. You can certainly do everything all the time. You can do everything, like my joke, the kitchen sink. Okay. So you can, and we've certainly built out some very robust integrations, but one of the steps that we do is to encourage, let's start with what we know we need, or if you're moving from another system into engaging networks, let's start with what you're doing today, get rid of stuff that is kind of meh, you don't really need that. Let's start there, but then let's go ahead and iterate after that. And so as I mentioned, part of what we've been able to do because of the partnership we have with engaging networks, we've built 10, 11, a whole bunch of these at this point, is that that will afford us to give some best practices. So that's where that default out-of-the-box integration comes into play, of just saying, this is something we've done before. So I encourage you to ask that sort of question when you go to build out an integration, like, hey, we want to do the blue-eyed eats oranges on Tuesdays campaign or group or whatever. Okay, maybe it's some really weird field that you have in your database. Is that something that they've done, that has been built before, that's been pushed before? Is it some crazy calculation that you're trying to do at the time of the integration? Maybe ask have you done this before? Have other organizations done this before? And how have they solved for that? So I encourage to start with the kind of overall question and not try to start immediately with, we need blue-eyed people who eat oranges on Tuesdays. No, the real thing is you just need to know people who fruit on any day of the week or whatever. So, definitely ask to see if it's been done before, and then, if that can be repurposed or built upon or, shrunken down however you need, then that's great. Definitely try to use that framework and use that template if it exists. Because the more, at least from what we have seen, the more that you can build upon something that someone else has done, or something perhaps you've done in some other part of your application, perhaps an upload that you use. If there's that same kind of logic that's already been built and you can recycle, then just recycle that. Don't reinvent the wheel. Don't start from scratch if you don't have to. So we've talked about who and what and why and where. Lucas is going to get us into the how.
In a very basic sort of sense, I suppose. So the first thing to understand is what's going to trigger a record to go back and forth between your system and any other system you're talking about. Is it something you can reliably control? Is it something that you can query on? In Roy, at least, we have a fully audited set of tables. So any change to any of our core tables, which is going to be where we store our name or address or email or phone or a few other bits of information, all of that is fully audited. So we know exactly who and when, who changed the record and when they did it. So if we're bringing data over from engaging networks, we can record an engaging network specific user ID on this record, on an individual record, so that we know that that's where that change came from. Now, when we're looking for changes to send over to another system, we don't want to send a record that engaging networks just changed in our system back to them. That's what's known as a data loop. Some vendors are very good at helping to prevent data leaks. Engaging Networks is one. Whenever we import records from Roy into Engaging Networks using their bulk import API, I know that the next day when I'm looking for changed records, I'm not going to see the same ones that I just sent them today. And so it's the same thing in Roy. I know who changed my records, and I know exactly when they changed them as well. So we can very easily control what gets sent over and when it gets sent over. Data loops.
And not all systems do that, like Engaging
No.
Networks does. So also something you
There
don't
are.
hear, because you probably have Engaging Networks, but if you don't, it's definitely something to consider, particularly with building out an integration.
Yeah, one good question to always ask is, are they able to identify a change in their system? And specifically, are they able to identify who changed that record? It goes a long way in both troubleshooting when a change happened. If someone on your team has a question about, okay, I see a change happened on this record, who did it and why? In Roy and Engaging Networks, we can pretty easily say who and why and when. Not all systems are quite that helpful. Record matching, when it comes back into Roy, every system everywhere has a number on an individual record, and that's fantastic. But when we start thinking about an online system like the Engaging Network, where email is the primary key, so yes, there's a supporter ID associated with this email address. But if you've ever come across a couple, a household who shares an email address, Tom and Frank, or Mary and Tom, depending on who updated or who submitted a form most recently in that online system, Mary could overwrite Tom, or Tom could overwrite Frank. And through hard-learned practices in Roy, we've learned we can't trust these system IDs coming from another system. Everyone has a first name. So first name, no matter what we're doing, when we're looking at trying to match a record from a foreign system into Roy, the name field, the first name field, is a required piece of information for establishing that matching record. It would be wonderful if these system IDs could always be maintained and be truly unique. Some systems, so Roy will store our system ID in every foreign, every other vendor's system that we work with. So we'll pass that along just so that it's there as a helpful identifier. But even when we get that same identifier back in Roy, we're not going to necessarily trust that the foreign system hasn't somehow overwritten that value. Some will allow a user to actually overwrite the value. So we've seen cases where suddenly ID numbers no longer match at all when they come back in Roy. So the point being, everybody has a first name. As long as both systems have it, we're going to use that as one of the key matching criteria. And this comes back into this solid knowledge of the system in question, of knowing what the fields are in both systems, knowing how both systems update these records, how they track updates to these records, and how both systems make records available to be pulled back out. So that's this whole idea of data loops. How can you be sure that you're not getting yourself caught into a data loop? Roy and Engaging Networks do a fantastic job doing that together. In some cases, with some systems, Roy will have to actually fill in a custom field with a last change date and timestamp. And our only recourse when we pull a record back out of that system is to see, does their system last change date and timestamp match the same one that Roy stored at the time that we push that record over. If it does, then we know to discard that record. If we didn't do that, we would constantly be seeing seeing an in-stream of changed records from another system, but Roy happened to have been the last entity to have changed that record in the first place. So there's a lot to consider with what your foreign systems are doing, how they do them, and how they help you to keep all your data kind of straight and clean. The development cycle, it absolutely starts with Sarah and the whole discovery process. And this has been mentioned a couple of times in other sessions from yesterday as well. It always begins with a conversation, even if it's just Graham asking for, what do you guys want to see in reports as they start thinking about building out new reports. Everything starts with these discussions. That goes back to having proper stakeholders in all the systems concerned, either in your own teams or at vendors like Roy and Engaging Networks. Once all of this has been settled, we start the very standard development cycle. I build out what's been requested. It goes through a lengthy QC process internally before we start showing anything over to the client, asking them to go through a QC process. It's always best when we can have any level of test data, test pages, so that we can generate as much kind of junk data, as many variations as we can. And this also goes back to the very central idea of having stakeholders in your own system, stakeholders in your own company that can take the time to help us build these out properly. The more test data that we have from the beginning, the more things we're going to find as we work through the development cycle. And it's a matter of generating some of this test data, seeing what we've done for it, have we met all of the criteria that we're supposed to. Fantastic, we can move on to the next stage. But otherwise, the more test data that we can always have, the much easier it is.
Yeah, and part of the fun part, at least for me, when there are test pages is, can I break it? So it's great to build those out, things that are not public facing at all. Also, keynote there, like if you do a test page, don't let other people see it, just share the URL between yourselves. But be able to do that and see, it's also a good opportunity for you to see, did I set up the page correctly? Is the flow working correctly? We've gone into a few situations where someone might be launching brand new with Engaging Networks and they want to do the integration at the same time. That's often what we see. And so they're learning Engaging Networks while we're learning their data and what to do with it. So we'll toss up a test page, we'll make sure that, X, Y, and Z come over the way we're expecting it to, but then we'll also test it and go, do you realize like your state drop down has, country in it, or like prefix is totally wacky, or something. It's just a great opportunity to work together. So definitely test pages are great to set up to do that. And yeah, we've definitely had some cases where just the more stuff we come in, all of a sudden we go, oh, we didn't realize that, I don't know, you're accepting EFT sustainers, but there's a field missing for us to process it or whatever. So the more we can see it and more get a sense of what's real, then we can account for that before we launch. Because it might, despite the fact that we try to have a solid discovery process, some things get missed, some, a question's asked, but it doesn't quite click in quite the right way, so something doesn't surface until the 11th hour, and then we scramble and we make it happen. All right, I know it's almost lunch, so just a couple more slides, then we can eat. So after the cycle that we've gone through, we say, all right, time for the monthly release, and we're going to actually launch this thing, and everyone's happy, and champagne's popping, and you're eating donuts, and you're just like, this is the best thing ever. So what do? We definitely recommend, okay, just take a breath for a minute, because that, it can be a pretty intense process. Everyone gets nervous and does the nail biting, and like the week or two leading up to it, they're like, oh, what if it doesn't work? Like, it's gonna work. We've tested the hell out of this thing. Like, it's gonna be great. We promise you, all your pages look awesome. So definitely take a breather, give some high fives, and just watch it for a little bit. See what it looks like. We've made a bunch of assumptions about the type of data that comes in, how people are interacting with your pages, what sort of information they might be filling in. Some of those assumptions might be wrong. So you want to monitor it and see what what sort of data is actually coming in. Okay, now we realize maybe we need to tweak a couple things. So like the matching logic, we have a standard set that we recommend. We say, let's start with this because this is new. Let's start with what we know is okay. We aren't going to overwrite Tom with Mary or Frank with Tom, and it's a major donor board member, super duper VIP. Like, you don't want to do that. So we definitely like to launch with some caution, but then let's monitor it over the next few weeks and see, are there some dials we can turn to make it a little bit better? Maybe first 3 of the first name is sufficient because we know we have, half our database is Rob versus Robert, which would be really interesting if we had that. So, and we you want to have someone also partner with you with that. So that's part of what we do. It's not just we launch it and we're done, we stop talking to you. We take that breather and then we say like, okay, what do you think? How do you feel? Are there some adjustments we need to make? Here's what we're seeing in your data. We're seeing, all these records are error, donations are coming through with an error. We tied it back to page, campaign ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, you didn't have some field on there, and we need that in order to process your data. So things like that, you want to be able to monitor that, but then also there comes a time where you just want to enhance it. You're used to it, you're used to the tool, you're used to seeing the sort of data that goes back and forth. Then you go, oh, we have that new campaign coming up. We really need to know shoe size, so let's make sure we push shoe size over. Or, we're doing this brand new thing, and I've heard about this honor and memorial stuff we haven't done before. Like, how do we do that? Great, let's, make sure you just have that conversation. And as you enhance, also make sure you're talking to the players at, engaging networks in your system to say, can this thing do this? Because we've seen some cases where someone says like, oh, well, we just launched the new e-commerce module because, Graham said that it deployed on Friday, so we're doing it. Where's the data? And we're like, we didn't know to grab it. We didn't know that we had to do that. So making sure that you keep that communication going, even as you enhance and you look to build out, very important to do, so that you can just keep making it awesome. And then, so as I said, we really want to just monitor it, maintain it. There are kind of different versions of that monitoring and maintenance that happen. Lucas has all of his fancy stuff, and this thing didn't happen and it should have, and he fixes stuff if things look weird. But also will inform, our client services team, will inform us of like, hey, this is strange. I know that this, one organization, they have donations coming in all day, every day, but we didn't see any gifts yesterday. What's up with that? Something's weird. So you want to also make sure you have that sort of like more technical level of monitoring, but also have people who can just get in there and look at it, and just look at that data that's coming through and do your reconciliation, do that analysis. And if something looks off, definitely raise your hand and work with your partners, your stakeholders, to make sure everything's looking okay.
And to speak to that as well, one really wonderful thing about engaging networks is they're also of the same mentality. They're also monitoring all this stuff. If you know Farhan, he knows what's going on in the system. And they're able to alert us before even we've recognized anything or anything that we've seen may happen. Again, it's very important to have work with partners that you trust. I'm very happy to say that engaging networks is a partner that we can trust very well.
Yeah, it's great to also be collaborative with them when trying to resolve something. It's not like, no, we didn't get with you and it's your system. It's more just like, this is weird. Where maybe did something fall through the cracks? Was there a blip with the internet that maybe made a file not come through correctly or whatnot? So you definitely want to keep an eye on those things. And the other thing that we have built out is we try to make it transparent to our clients of what is coming through and what's being pushed. So we have a whole set of queues within our system that show, hey, here are the number of records that went through from this exact time period, from yesterday or 2 days ago, or whatever the case might be. But then we'll also work on, okay, here's stuff that there's something weird about this record that came through, so we're gonna hold it here because we really think a human needs to look at it. And so that's also part of that monitoring and maintaining, is you want someone to be able to dedicate themselves to look at that, but also it shouldn't be a full-time job. If you have someone manually trying to resolve 1,000 records a day, that's absurd. That's where you want to do some sort of tweaking, and you want to say okay, we thought this might be a condition, we figured out the page that maybe was fixed there, or it's, anyone who matches a board member or a major donor, we're gonna hold those here because the board team, the VIP team, they should handle these. I've seen that happen, and I've seen that very quickly stop because that person almost never has time to do that sort of stuff. So that's the other thing to think through, is just what's that kind of cost benefit analysis of what you're allowed to automatically push through versus what might require a human. Because the point of the integration is you want it to be something that's automated, it's something that can be a little bit more hands-off, so that you can do the rest of the great work that you're doing as organizations. I think that was our original tagline for this presentation. It was sinks that work hard, so you don't have to. Then it was a little cheesy, so we did something else. So just to recap, and y'all have been super quiet, so either we're really thorough or you're really bored and you just want lunch. Either way, okay. So just recap, integrations, who still thinks they're really scary? Maybe you didn't think they were scary to begin with. There. Well, we'll talk later, I got your number. But really, it's just think of it in human terms, think of it in English, think of it in just what is it you're trying to do, and then the rest will fall into place. Don't worry about the acronyms, don't worry about all the connectors and all that stuff. But that's the other thing, there's no, there was talk, I know yesterday in a couple sessions of oh, and then there's the connector that does this thing. We don't use, unless you're considered the connector, but I think you should change your business cards. But don't necessarily worry about that. Again, if you have those partners you trust, and just be able to speak in human terms. This is what I want to do, where I want to do it, how I want to do it, and let those partners help figure out the rest of it, the nitty gritty. And yeah, just so much comes down to the communication, keeping that open. Engaging networks. I think like Luke said earlier, when you reach out to us, just like when you reach out to Engaging Networks, it's not just this black hole of an inbox of I don't know who I'm gonna get, and it might be 10 different people for my one question. I very much think it's important to be able to have a human, an actual human that their name, who they are, and you can reach out to them in case those things, questions do arise. And yeah, just think about what it is you need, what you're trying to do, and there's really always room for improvement. It's not a set it and forget it. We've had some organizations that have set up their integrations, and it might be 2 years before they're even ready to think about doing anything else with it, and they're just so happy because we nailed it on the first shot. But I think probably every organization at some point that we've worked with has come back saying, oh yeah, now there's this thing we want to do, let's do it. We say, oh, you can actually do that already because we built this particular piece in a flexible way. And that's the other thing to think through is the more hard coding of field X is field Y over here, the less you can do with that and say oh, this is a drop down here and it matches our drop down here. As long as those codes are the same, that's probably more flexible. So you add the same code in both systems, you should be good to go. So that's the other thing to really just think through as you're building these things out. Any final words? Lunch?
Yeah, it's time for lunch.